Right now, you are the only animal on Earth that cooks its food. Every other creature, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, eats everything raw, exactly as nature provides it. Only humans take their food, apply fire to it, and transform it before eating. We treat this as completely normal. But stop and think about how strange it actually is. At some point, deep in the past, one of your ancestors took something they would normally have eaten cold and raw, held it over a flame, and decided to eat the result. Nobody had ever done it before. There was no recipe, no tradition, no example to follow. So what was that first meal? What was the very first thing a human being ever cooked? And here is the part that will surprise you. The answer to that question might be the reason you have the brain you're using to think about it right now. To understand the first cooked meal, we have to go back to a world before cooking existed and picture what eating was actually like. For an early human ancestor, eating raw food was a full-time job and a miserable one. Think about a gorilla today. A gorilla spends up to half of its entire day, every day, just chewing. Raw leaves, raw stems, raw roots. Their teeth are huge, their jaw muscles are enormous, and their gut is a vast fermentation tank designed to slowly break down tough, raw plant matter. Raw food gives up its energy reluctantly. You have to grind through enormous amounts of it for hours just to survive. Our earliest ancestors lived the same way. They had big teeth, powerful jaws, and large bellies to hold long digestive systems. They spent their days chewing, chewing, chewing. Raw food kept them alive, but it kept them trapped, spending most of their waking hours just processing calories. And then, somewhere, everything changed. And it almost certainly began with fire that humans did not create. Long before humans could make fire, they lived surrounded by it. Wildfires, sparked by lightning, regularly swept across the ancient grasslands of Africa. And here is the key. After a wildfire passes, the landscape is not empty. It is scattered with food that has been transformed. Underground roots and tubers roasted in the earth. Seeds toasted where they fell. And the bodies of small animals that could not escape the flames, effectively already cooked. Picture that first ancestor walking across a burned landscape, hungry, and finding a root that the fire had roasted in the ground. They pick it up. It's warm. It's soft. It smells completely different from the hard, bitter, raw version they know. They take a cautious bite, and it is easier to chew, sweeter, and better in every way. That may have been the first taste of cooked food in all of human history. Not created on purpose, but discovered in the ashes of a wildfire. And this points us toward the most likely answer to our question. The first thing humans ever cooked was probably not a mammoth steak sizzling over a campfire. It was most likely a humble root vegetable, a tuber, accidentally roasted in the ground by a passing wildfire. This might feel a little disappointing. We imagine our ancestors as mighty hunters, and we picture that first cooked meal as meat. But most anthropologists think the reality was more ordinary and far more important. Underground tubers were everywhere. They were reliable, and they did not need to be caught or killed. A root roasting in fire-warmed earth is simply the most likely thing to have been cooked first, long before anyone was deliberately grilling meat. And whether it was a root or, later, a piece of meat or fish, the discovery that followed was one of the most powerful in the history of life. Because cooking does something almost magical to food. Cooking is like doing part of your digestion before the food ever enters your body. When you heat food, the heat breaks down tough fibers and unravels complex molecules, work your stomach would otherwise have to do itself. Heat gelatinizes the starch inside a tuber, turning it soft and instantly more digestible. It unwinds the proteins in meat. It kills many of the parasites and bacteria that make raw food dangerous. And the result is staggering. Scientific experiments have measured this directly. In one careful study, researchers fed mice either raw or cooked food and tracked their body weight. The mice eating cooked food gained significantly more weight from the very same ingredients, whether it was tubers or meat. Cooking did not add a single calorie. It simply unlocked far more of the energy that was already trapped inside, energy that raw eating leaves behind. That is the secret. Cooking is a machine for unlocking energy. The same root, the same piece of meat, suddenly gives your body dramatically more fuel once it has been cooked. And that extra fuel changed absolutely everything. This is where we reach the idea that makes this whole story so important. It is called the cooking hypothesis, and its most famous champion is Richard Wrangham, a biological anthropologist at Harvard University. In his work, including his book, Catching Fire, Wrangham argues something bold, that cooking did not just improve human life. Cooking created humans in the first place. Here is his reasoning. The human brain is an incredibly expensive organ. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but burns roughly 20% of your energy. A brain like ours is enormously hungry, and you simply cannot power it on raw food alone, not without spending every waking hour chewing like a gorilla. Something had to pay for that brain. Wrangham argues that something was fire. Once our ancestors began cooking, a flood of new energy became available. And crucially, cooked food is soft. It does not need those huge teeth, those massive jaws, or that enormous gut. So evolution began to change the human body itself. Our teeth got smaller. Our jaws got weaker. Our guts shrank because they no longer needed to process mountains of raw fiber. And all that saved energy and all those spare hours no longer spent chewing could be poured into the one organ that would define us, the brain. Look at the timeline and it fits. Around 1.9 million years ago, a new ancestor appeared, Homo erectus. Compared to what came before, Homo erectus had a dramatically bigger brain, smaller teeth, a flatter face, and a more human-like body. Wrangham argues this is no coincidence. This is the body of a creature that had started to cook. And the physical evidence keeps pushing further back. Deep inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, scientists found traces of ash and burnt bone, suggesting controlled fire around 1 million years ago. And at a site in Israel called Gesher Benot Yaakov, researchers found the clearest early evidence yet, the remains of fish, carefully heated around 780,000 years ago. Some of the very first cooking we can actually prove was seafood. Ancient humans sitting by the water cooking fish. Now, not everyone fully agrees with Wrangham. Some scientists argue the solid evidence for controlled fire does not appear until much later, closer to 400,000 years ago, which is well after our brains had already started growing. It remains a genuine scientific debate. But almost everyone agrees on the deeper point, that at some stage, cooking became a transformative force that reshaped our bodies, our diets, and our societies. Because cooking gave us something else, something beyond calories. It gave us time. A gorilla must spend half its day chewing. Once we cooked, we could get more energy from food in a fraction of that time. Suddenly, our ancestors had free hours in the day that no ape had ever had. Hours to make tools, to plan hunts, to explore, to talk, and to build the intricate social lives that make us human. And cooking pulled us together. Raw food is eaten wherever you find it, alone, on the spot. But cooking needs a fire, and a fire is a fixed place. So people had to bring food back to one spot and share it. The campfire became the center of human life, a place to gather every single night, to eat together, to tell stories, and to bond. The simple act of cooking may have helped invent the family meal, and with it, much of human society. So what was the first thing humans ever cooked? The honest answer is that we will probably never know the exact meal. But the best evidence points to something quiet and humble. Not a hunter's trophy, but a root vegetable, roasted by accident in the aftermath of a wildfire, picked up by a curious, hungry ancestor who noticed it tasted better and was easier to eat. That single moment, repeated and refined over hundreds of thousands of years, may be the most important thing our species has ever done. We are sometimes called the tool-making animal or the talking animal. But we might just as truly be called the cooking animal. It is the one thing no other creature does, and it may be the very thing that made us who we are. The next time you cook a meal, remember what you are really doing. You are performing an act almost as old as humanity itself, the same act that shrank our teeth, freed our time, lit our nights, and fed the growth of the human brain. Your ancestors did not just cook because it tasted good. In a very real way, cooking is what turned them into you.